It's for women only, what you need to know about the inner lives of men. Most men, 75 to 85% of men, have this immense self-doubt.
It wasn't intentional when she would hit that raw nerve. It was just that she didn't know.
Welcome to the Grace Marriage Podcast. I'm Brad Rhoads.
And I'm Marilyn Rhoads. We're here to help you build a marriage that's stronger, more connected, and full of grace.
I'm Rick Dayton, joining Brad and Marilyn as we bring you weekly conversations designed to inspire and equip you to live intentionally in your marriage.
We'll share practical tips, powerful stories, and strategies to help you and your spouse grow closer and thrive together.
So whether you're just starting out or have been married for years, there's always room to grow. Let's do this together. This is the Grace Marriage Podcast.
This is Brad Rhoads with the Grace Marriage Podcast, and I am thrilled to have two friends and partners in ministry, Jeff and Shaunti Feldhahn, authors of numerous books, best-selling books, researchers, all kinds of stuff, just so much to offer. And the coolest thing is when you get to know them, man, they're just great, authentic people that you just want to hang out with. So welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Brad. We love Grace Marriage, you guys, and are just delated to
We
be
just
here.
wish we lived closer to you, because
Yeah.
we'd be hanging out constantly.
In fact, it just bugs me because I was in Atlanta and I didn't, so it bothers me that I did not remember to follow up. So I'm sorry about that. But yeah, I'm thrilled you're on the podcast. And just tell us, like, how do you go to, like, all of a sudden you're a researcher and you're a best-selling author and you're doing ministry together? I mean, what's the journey that got you there? And I know, Jeff, we got something in common. We're both lawyers.
Both lawyers, yeah. And man, the journey is, when people say, how did you get here? How can I do what you guys do? And it's like, we really don't have a standard roadmap that we can offer to you. It was just God doing some God things.
It was basically God going, okay, you're going to start over here, and then I'm going to lead you in these crazy ways to doing what you're doing today. The short version is that, we started out in New York. Jeff's an attorney, as you were saying. I started out on Wall Street, and we didn't know that God was building this kind of analytical
Skill set. Yeah.
That he was going to use in a completely different way.
Well, to be fair, God had put in Shaunti the ability to look at things and not just be satisfied with what the surface appears to offer. She has this uncanny ability to ask questions, to try to dig in and get underneath the surface. And that is a phenomenal talent to have as an analyst. It's a little more challenging in a marriage. However, we make it work, and she is amazing at it.
Well, and a friend of mine said God rarely lights up the whole path. He just lights up kind of the next step of the path. Yes. And my experience is when you decide you want to do something and you try to do it, it's very frustrating and stressful. If you just say, hey, I'm clay, you're potter, and you treat it more of a downstream mentality where I'm just going to go downstream where the Lord takes it. Well, life's a lot better that way, because I've had times where I wanted to create something and I just made a mess.
Mm-hmm. I am a master of beating my head against a wall and trying to turn it into a door. Oh. So we learned really early that God was just pulling us in these directions, and it was completely different than what we thought. And, long story short is we ended up having this incredible opportunity to step into this author space very supernaturally. Like I felt God was asking me to write a book. This was years ago. And I had never wanted to write a book. All I knew about him publishing was that it was impossible to get published. Like literally, this was not an interest at all. But it's interesting you mentioned that where God is working. I was actually doing Henry Blackaby's devotional from
Experiencing God.
And that day that I had that weird feeling that God was telling me to write a book on this particular topic was the same day in the devotional that I turned to the page where Blackaby says, we so limit God. so often by not responding when he calls us to do something, because we look at that thing, whatever that thing is, and we think, I can't accomplish that, which is exactly what I had been doing, right? And Blackaby's point was, yeah, if God is calling you to do something you can't accomplish, then by definition, only he can accomplish it. And it's a God-sized work. And he gets all the glory. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to try this. I'm going to do what I can do. I can literally start typing on my computer, but Lord, you're going to have to do the publishing thing. Like truly, because I can't accomplish that at all. 2 days later, thank God he didn't have me wait very long. 2 days later, I just happened to meet somebody who found out what I was doing and started laughing. And he was like, you are not going to believe this. But just last week, I was sitting down with a major Christian publisher, listening to them tell me they really wanted to publish a book on this exact topic. And if I happened to run across anyone writing a book like that, would I let them know? That is literally how the whole thing started. Like you can't arrange that.
You can't.
That was just God.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, not only does it limit God's work through us, but it also makes life less of an adventure, and it brings less life to us. Now, Jeff, I'm guessing your life's an adventure being married to Shaunti?
It has its moments, joyful moments,
Yeah.
joyful moments. No, seriously. I mean, I'm a planner, but I have the kind of split personality in that I also fly by the seat of my pants at times, and it seems like that's what we're doing a fair bit of the way. We plan, we try to make our, steps seem logical, and then just roll with what comes
and roll with what he leads.
Well, and that's one thing I love is initiative, and it's just like you guys are always trying to do things to impact more people. I mean, from books to blogs to podcasts. And I just love when people will have an idea and actually do it. Because so many people just have that idea housed in their head for years. And then if you look at, I saw a hospice study that some of the greatest regrets of the dying is that I didn't take the risk or do what I really wish I'd have done. So I think there's a real message to our listeners that, what is it in your head? That's like, you feel like you have a little pull to do that. Frankly, just ask yourself, will you regret it if you didn't do it? That's why I left the law practice. I thought if I don't leave the law practice, I'll regret it. So, well, let's go. What was the book? So tell us, what was the book that the Lord intervened and like supernaturally put you in front of somebody and it all got published?
Well, that was years ago, believe it or not. That was actually about a balanced Christian response to the Y2K problem back in the day.
So this was late 90s.
Late 90s, because at the time when I felt called to do that, because I should explain, I had been looking at the Y2K issue on Wall Street for years. It was just any other technical issue. The finance world was on top of it. And I was really surprised when we moved to Atlanta that, a couple years before the Y2K rollover, that either people didn't understand anything about the fact that, there could be issues and the church should be prepared to be a blessing if there were, or it was grab the dog, the shotgun, and head to the hills. It's going to be a crisis. And I'm like, neither of those looks like Jesus to me. Like, we're not supposed to have a spirit of fear. We're supposed to have a spirit of power and love and sound mind. And we are called, no matter what goes on in our world, the church is called to be a blessing and to not ignore things. Like you don't ignore a hurricane, right? It may not hit, but you should be prepared to be a blessing. So it was basically, that was the message of the book. And it was really interesting to see how God, again, set it up to come out just at the right time as everybody started going, what's this Y2K thing? And so many pastors told me that it really helped them to walk that, hopefully, that more care-oriented, balanced line. Not making any predictions, because that was one of the things that I felt like too many people were doing. Not making any predictions. Either it's going to be crisis or it's going to be nothing, but just, hey, what's the calling of the church? And let let's let that be a it kind of almost like a, here, I'm giving you this as practice.
Yeah.
You use something that you can't see coming, that something you can see coming, to maybe set you up to be a blessing for things you can't see coming.
And she fully imagined, I think, at that time, that this was kind of a one-off thing. I responded to God's calling. I wrote the book, and then, and she spoke, she was on all sorts of media, and she spoke at events live, all of that. But then it was kind of like, okay, now don't know what's next. And then the opportunities came to write a couple more books, because that one was a bestseller. And then she had a couple of opportunities to write some novels. And so she did that.
So what?
And one of the main, and I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
And then one of the main characters in one of the novels that I was writing was a man. And I didn't know how to put thoughts in this guy's head, because, I had to say what my main character was thinking, right? Not just what he was doing. And I realized I had no idea what a guy would be thinking. And so I started asking Jeff, or if he'd be out to dinner with another couple.
She asked Jeff, and the responses she got from Jeff were, "Are you kidding me?" No, not me, not my response, but I would tell her, and she would go, "Really?
Nah,
really?
That's not what guys would be thinking."
And so then we'd go out to dinner with other folks, and she'd ask other guys.
And basically what I said was, here's the scene in the novel that my character is in. What would you be thinking in the situation? And that's when I started going, are you kidding me? Like, all these things that I was hearing from these men that were actually really kind of important, and these really fundamental needs and worries and desires and things that hurt their feelings and things that really lit them up. And I had no idea. Like, we'd been married probably 7-8 years at that point. And that's when I felt like God really kind of hit that analyst thing in me and said, yeah, do a survey of men. See if this is true. And so I did, and that became the book For Women Only. And started me on this research path that we've been on ever since.
And a lot of our listeners will have read For Women Only, but why don't you sum up kind of the thesis of the findings of For Women Only?
Sure. Yeah. For women, the subtitle says it all. It's For Women Only, What You Need to Know About the Inner Lives of Men. And it's essentially quantifying all these things, and there's 8 topics in the book about that we as women tend not to get about men, that tend to impact us most of the time, not with all marriages, because everybody's different, but they tend to be things that have a fairly big impact, and they're also fairly limited. So it's like little things that once you know it, oof, right, it has a pretty big impact. So, for example, one of the things that was the biggest surprise for me is that these guys, you look so confident in yourselves. And we kind of think you need to be taken down a peg or two. And instead, on the inside, most men, 75 to 85% of men, depending on which survey we're talking about, have this immense self-doubt. And this constant underneath the surface of, am I good at what I do? Like, do I measure up? Do I have what it takes to be a great husband or a great dad or a great salesperson or a great ministry leader or whatever it is? And we are just shocked that insecurity is in there.
And as a woman, you can accidentally trigger that, kind of hit that raw nerve from time to time, just because you didn't know it. And I'll say, prior to Shaunti doing that research, we had a good marriage, but a marriage that had some bumps along the way. There were a few nights, more than a few, when one of us would sleep in the guest bedroom, just because we were
which one of you? Which one of you?
It didn't matter. Whichever one didn't get into bed, our bed at the first time.
I am not sleeping next to someone who doesn't care about me.
But see, here's what happened then. Shaunti could have easily have just taken that as information, and that's interesting. But she doesn't. She takes it and then she applies it to our marriage, and worked. I mean, it
And it
really worked.
drastically
And what it also did for me was I realized that she just didn't know these things about me. It wasn't intentional when, she would hit that raw nerve with me. It wasn't like she was trying to upset me. It was just that she didn't know that I had this vulnerability in this particular area. And so once she knew that, she went about to, working to build me up in that area instead of allowing, to accidentally hit those raw nerves.
We basically, I mean, Brad, the main thing that we have now found over 20 years of research, and again, by the way, like I said, these are generalizations, it's not going to apply to everybody. That's why one of the reasons we did the surveys, if you have 80% of men who said a particular way, by definition, 20% didn't, right? Everybody's an individual. But one of the things that we've found over time is that often, and I would go so far as to say, actually, most cases of heartache and most cases of, sleeping in separate bedrooms and hurting each other's feelings is because we're not aware that the other person actually even has this raw nerve because it's different from ours. Like, I don't have that question in my heart constantly of, am I any good at what I do? Right? Like, I tend to actually think I'm pretty good at what I do some of the time. It's not like I can be questioned like, oh, did I make the right decision with the kids? Like, anyone has that. But it's not a thing that's underneath the surface where if Jeff says, hey, Shaunti, why did you make that decision? I don't get my back up. I assume he's asking for information. I don't realize that when I say, Jeff, why did you do that with the kids? That I'm hitting a nerve that's saying you're an idiot. And I don't intend that, but it makes so much difference to know that it's going to hit that nerve. And I instead say, hey, you did this thing with the kids. I know you had a reason. Can you help me understand what it is? It's asking the same question, but it's doing it in a way that honors the fact that
how you're wired.
He has this vulnerability inside, and he does the same then with me.
And the other thing that was honestly just kind of mind shifting, enlightening for both of us was, oftentimes in marriage, when you're sideways with your spouse, you sometimes will have that thought, it's just her. She just needs to adapt. She needs to do this differently, whatever it is. And the survey data showed that it was women in general or men in general. So it wasn't just that your spouse was an outlier and just had these super sensitivities. It's the way we tend as male and female, how we're wired in certain things, and things hit us differently. And so now all of a sudden, with a bit more grace, I could go, gosh, this isn't just Shaunti being Shaunti. This is Shaunti being a woman. And I need to step up and address things in a loving, kind, generous way.
Well, and you always were generous. You just didn't know when there were things that you were doing that were hurting because they were hitting the wrong nerve.
Right.
The reverse example, if you don't mind, Brad,
go ahead.
Sharing, like the reverse example of hitting the wrong nerve on my end would be that he didn't know that even in a great marriage, women's insecurity, ours, again, 75 to 85% ish of women, depending on the survey, our question isn't, am I able? It's more, am I lovable? Like, am I special? And that doesn't go away just because you have a good marriage. Like, just because your wife walked down the aisle and said, I do, it doesn't mean, okay, the switch is flipped. Now I feel permanently loved, right? Like in marriage, that question just morphs to, does he really love me? Like, are we okay? Is he glad he married me? And the raw nerve that you could hit would be if we were having an argument and you just shut down and you're like, I got to get space, and you walk away. that
And everything's still unresolved.
and it's still unresolved, that triggers for, again, most women, it's not all, but most women, that triggers this, are we okay kind of feeling. And for him, it's just an argument. Like, he doesn't know that he's left her with this roiling in her gut, wondering, are we all right? And he doesn't know that it makes this huge difference if before he walks away, he says, look, I'm angry, I need space, but listen, we're okay. We'll pick this up, in a couple hours. Like, that makes all the difference. And, it's just a matter of understanding these vulnerabilities in one another.
Yeah, and I see both sides. Like, Jeff, my mentor, would always tell me when Marilyn says something, take it as a perception, not a judgment. She's just making a perception. Like she's making a perception about your parenting. She's not calling you a bad parent. And he would always say men tend to take things as judgments on the person when the wife's really just making a perception about one issue. And what you said, Shaunti, is so true as well, because like nothing Marilyn hates more than she feels I don't care.
Yep.
It's like she's like this apathetic, who gives a rip attitude where you just have this cold, uncaring, unloving feel. Mm-hmm. She goes, I'd rather you be rude than that. I'd rather you be, she goes, I hate feeling when you're like, ugh,
Well, we didn't, okay, this is funny. So in one of our studies, one of my favorite studies was, when I say studies, I mean the research studies that we've done, was with the happiest couples, like the happiest marriages, because we wanted to study them and find out what are they doing differently. Like, what are the little like actions and habits that they're doing that they may not even realize that they're doing. And one of the things that we found about the men was that in the happiest marriages, they had learned, and it was either learned or they did it automatically, but one way or another, that when they're in a bad mood, that they stop the black cloud of doom from following them around the house. Like that they pull themselves out of a funk, and that kind of apathetic, literally that is one of the secrets of the happiest marriages.
Well, when you think
the men did that.
Well, you always back to Genesis when he says, if you do well, will not your spirits be lifted? So if you get in bad spirits and you just choose not to do well, you're just going to get worse spirits. If you're in bad spirits and you choose to love and you choose, it actually helps lift your spirit. Now, you hopefully won't do as bad as he did in the Bible and kill somebody, but
right.
But I don't go there. But we're lawyers. We won't represent you. But why don't? But I'm so grateful for y'all's resources. Now, why do you think it is that people get so sensitive when you talk about men and women now? So if you talk about even generalizations that are 75, 80%, I mean, hair comes up on some people's backs.
It does. And let me just say, on some people's backs.
Not most.
No,
that's true.
It's really not most. Most people, it doesn't seem like a shocking statement to say men and women are different.
In some ways.
In some ways. It just isn't shocking for most. I wanted to say normal people, but that would be pejorative. But most people, there are some corners of the internet. I mean, you can find them. You can find anything out there on the internet where they just don't like women or they just don't like men, and they have trained themselves to look for the worst interpretation possible for any action done by a woman or any action done by a man, and therefore feed that belief that they're just bad.
Well, I think in today's world, there is a lot of magical thinking, right? Like there's a lot of people who are like, well, it shouldn't be that way. We shouldn't have these differences. And okay, like
I'd like that.
I get that. Like I'm a pretty strong, confident woman, and I can like bulldoze people with the best of them, and my tendency is to say it shouldn't be that way, right? Like I get that very personally, but it's kind of that Dr. Phil phrase, like, okay, but how's that working for you?
Mm-hmm.
like we can say it shouldn't be that he has that vulnerability. Why should he be so oversensitive when I, question what he did? Like, that's just silly. Okay. But if it is, and you have your own vulnerabilities and they tend to be different, wouldn't it be better if we're trying to care for one another for us to learn those areas so that I can not only not hit that raw nerve constantly and hurt his feelings,
That's so good.
same thing for mine, but that so I can look for those areas and he can look for those areas in me where we can build one another up. Like, I would rather know that if it's true. And truly, Brad, I really think the vast majority of people, they're on it. They agree with that. They know that there are some of these differences. It's a small number.
They're just not loud in
Yeah.
saying that. They're not loud in saying we're different. Darn it, they're just not.
Well, reasonable people usually aren't that loud, and if they were, they probably wouldn't be reasonable. But that's
Yeah.
but as one of my daughters, I have a daughter who's a real thinker, and she goes, "Let's not talk about what if. Let's just talk about what it is." That's what she said. She's like what? But it's but thank you so much. We're gonna keep this going. But if you could share with our audience, like, what resources you guys have to help people, and how could your podcast, your blogs, just how people could get more exposure. Shaunti and Jeff have so much to offer, and I will tell you, the more you listen to them, the better off you'll be, both personally and in your marriage. So why don't you share with our audience?
Thanks, Brad.
Why don't you share it with,
I think your website.
Yeah, well, I mean, the
The
easiest
jumping off
place
point.
to start is Shaunti.com, which is SHAUNTI.com. And because that will get you to, we have a weekly resources, which is basically like a blog, articles, equipping. Like, if you care about relationships, you care about marriage and parenting and all mental health and all the other things that we're doing, that's where we, just as a ministry, release those things every week. We also have a podcast called I Wish You Could Hear This, which is, we say that because so often in our research, we hear these unbelievable stories and insights when we do these interviews, and we're constantly going, oh, I wish people could hear this. So that's why we call the podcast I Wish You Could Hear This. And we have the books for women only and for men only, and many other books that you can find on the website. And we also love coming to your church and doing marriage events, or me doing women's events. So.
Yeah, I would highly commend them to you in every capacity. And thank you for listening to the Grace Marriage Podcast. We're about investing in marriage. And one way you can invest in your marriage is people that keep marriage front of mind. They listen to podcasts, they read, they do these things. They have better marriages. Why? Because they're growing. And life's more fun and marriage is better when you're learning and you're growing. So that's why we launched Grace Marriage, so you can have a pathway to intentionally invest in your marriage over a long period of time, to take the great principles that Shaunti and Jeff and others teach and have a platform to put them into practice consistently. So if you're in Grace Marriage, stay in. If you're not, bring it to your church. Shaunti and Jeff, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you for joining us on the Grace Marriage Podcast. We really hope you're feeling inspired to take intentional steps to grow in your marriage.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with a friend. Your support helps us spread the message of grace and reach even more couples.
And if you have a moment, please leave us a review. Your feedback means a lot to us and helps others discover the podcast.
To learn more about how you can grow in your marriage, visit us at gracemarriage.com. Keep building stronger, grace-filled marriages.
We'll see you next week on the Grace Marriage Podcast. Until then, keep growing in grace.